There are moments when your greatest concern is not about yourself, but about the people you love. You look at your family, your home, and everything you have built, and a quiet question begins to rise within you. Are they truly safe? Are they protected in ways that go beyond what you can see? This feeling does not come from weakness. It comes from love. The deeper the love, the stronger the desire to protect. You want to shield your family from harm, from danger, from anything that could disturb their peace. You think about their future, their well-being, their safety, even when they are not near you. But there is something that every heart eventually realizes. There are limits to what you can control. You can be careful. You can be attentive. You can do everything within your reach. And yet, there are still things beyond your power. Situations you cannot predict. Moments you cannot prevent. Realities you cannot fully manage. And this is where a deeper need begins to emerge. Not just protection that comes from effort, but protection that comes from God. The Holy Bible reveals that protection is not only physical, it is spiritual, it is constant, it is active even when you are unaware. And throughout history, there has been one figure chosen to represent this kind of faithful, silent, and powerful protection within a family. Saint Joseph, a man who did not speak many words yet carried one of the greatest responsibilities ever given. A guardian, a protector, a man entrusted with the care of the Holy Family. His strength was not loud, but it was unwavering. His presence was not dramatic, but it was powerful. And today that same spiritual protection can be invited into your home. This is not just about asking for safety. It is about establishing a covering over your family, a presence that surrounds, guards, and sustains every person you love, a protection that reaches where your hands cannot reach. As this prayer begins, something important is about to happen. You will move from concern to trust, from fear to peace, from trying to control everything to placing everything into the hands of God. But before that shift fully takes place, there is something you need to recognize within yourself. A feeling that has been quietly present, perhaps for a long time, the constant concern for your family that never fully goes away. When the concern for your family never leaves your mind, there is a kind of thought that returns again and again, no matter how much you try to focus on other things. It appears during the day, in the middle of your routine. It returns at night when everything is quiet. It is the thought of your family. Are they safe? Are they well? Is everything truly okay? This concern is not occasional. It is constant. It becomes part of how you think, part of how you feel, part of how you move through your day. Even when nothing is visibly wrong, there is still a part of your mind that remains alert. This is what love does. It creates a connection so deep that you begin to carry the well-being of others within you. Their safety becomes your priority. Their peace becomes your responsibility. And without realizing it, this responsibility can become heavy. The Holy Bible shows that caring for family is not only natural, it is sacred, but it also reveals something important. You were never meant to carry this responsibility alone. When concern turns into constant tension, it begins to affect your inner peace. The mind starts to imagine possibilities. Situations that have not happened begin to feel real. Small uncertainties grow into larger worries. And the more you think about protecting your family, the more you realize something difficult. You cannot be everywhere at once. You cannot see everything. You cannot prevent everything. No matter how much you love, your ability to protect has limits. This realization can create a quiet fear, one that is not always spoken, but deeply felt. What if something happens when I am not there? This question has weight. It reveals the gap between your love and your control. And in that gap, anxiety can begin to grow. But this is exactly where a shift needs to happen, because the solution is not to increase your control. The solution is to change where your trust is placed. When you begin to understand that your family is not only under your care, but under God's care, something starts to change. The responsibility you feel does not disappear, but it is no longer carried alone. There is a covering that goes beyond your presence. There is a protection that continues even when you are not there, and this realization begins to reduce the internal pressure that has been building inside you. But even with this understanding, there is still a deeper layer that needs to be addressed. A fear that many carry silently. The fear of not being able to protect the ones they love when it matters most. The silent fear of not being able to protect the ones you love. There is a fear that is rarely spoken out loud, yet it lives quietly within the heart of those who love deeply. It is not dramatic. It does not always appear as panic. It often shows up as a subtle tension, a thought that passes quickly, but leaves a trace behind. What if I cannot protect them when it truly matters? This fear does not come from a lack of faith. It comes from awareness. You understand that life is unpredictable. You know that no matter how attentive you are, there are moments beyond your reach. Situations can arise suddenly. Circumstances can change without warning. And in those moments you realize something that is difficult to accept. Your presence has limits. You cannot always be there. You cannot always intervene. You cannot always prevent what you wish you could stop. This awareness creates a quiet vulnerability, one that many carry without ever expressing it fully. The Holy Bible reveals that even those chosen by God experienced responsibility that exceeded human capacity. Protection, in its deepest form, has never been meant to rely solely on human strength. This is where the fear begins to reveal its purpose. It exposes the illusion of total control. As long as you believe that everything depends entirely on you, the pressure will continue to grow. Every potential risk becomes heavier. Every uncertainty becomes more intense. The mind begins to carry scenarios that may never happen, yet feel real enough to create emotional weight. But the moment you recognize that your role is not to control everything, but to trust beyond what you can control, something begins to shift. This does not remove your care. It refines it. Instead of trying to be the ultimate protector, you begin to understand your position differently. You care, you act, you remain attentive, but you also acknowledge that there is a greater protection at work. Saint Joseph represents this truth in a powerful way. He was entrusted with the care of the Holy Family, yet his strength was not based on control over every situation. His strength was rooted in obedience, in trust, in the ability to respond to God's direction, even when circumstances were uncertain. He faced moments where protection required action, but also moments where protection required faith. This is the balance. You are called to care, but not to carry everything alone. You are called to protect, but not to depend only on your own strength. When this understanding begins to take root, the silent fear starts to lose its intensity. It does not disappear instantly, but it becomes lighter. It no longer dominates your thoughts in the same way. Instead of asking, "What if I cannot protect them?" your perspective begins to change. You begin to ask, "Who is protecting them even when I cannot?" This question opens the door to a deeper truth. Protection is not limited to what you can see or do. It extends into a dimension that goes beyond physical presence. And this leads to an important realization. Your home is not just a physical space. It is a spiritual environment that can be covered, guarded, and strengthened in ways that go far beyond walls and doors. The home as a spiritual space, more than walls, a sacred refuge. Your home may look like a physical place defined by walls, rooms, and structure, but there is something deeper happening within it. Every environment carries more than what is visible. It carries atmosphere, influence, and presence. This means your home is not just where your family lives. It is where emotions are formed, where thoughts are shaped, where peace is either strengthened or weakened. It is a space that reflects what is allowed to exist within it. Many people focus on protecting the physical aspects of their home. Doors are locked, security systems are installed, routines are created. These actions are important, but they address only one layer of protection. There is another layer that is often overlooked: the spiritual environment. The Holy Bible reveals that what surrounds you is not limited to what you can see. There are influences, both positive and negative, that affect the atmosphere of a place. This is why some environments feel peaceful, while others feel heavy. It is not always about what is happening externally. It is about what is present internally. When a home is not spiritually guarded, small tensions can grow. Words spoken in frustration can linger. Emotions can accumulate. Over time, the atmosphere begins to shift without anyone fully noticing how it happened. But when a home is spiritually covered, something different takes place. Peace becomes more consistent. Conflicts are resolved more clearly. The environment begins to support the well-being of those who live within it. There is a sense of stability that cannot be explained only by external conditions. This is what transforms a house into a refuge. A refuge is not defined by its structure. It is defined by its atmosphere. It is a place where those inside feel protected, not only physically, but emotionally and spiritually. Saint Joseph lived this reality. He was responsible for providing a safe environment for the Holy Family, not only through his actions, but through his presence. His faith, his obedience, and his quiet strength shaped the atmosphere of the home he protected. This reveals something important. Protection is not only about reacting to danger. It is about establishing an environment where peace can exist consistently. When you begin to see your home as a spiritual space, your approach changes. You become more intentional about what you allow into that environment. Words, attitudes, influences, and habits all begin to matter at a deeper level. You realize that protection is not only about keeping something out, it is also about inviting something in, inviting peace, inviting presence, inviting a covering that strengthens everything within your home. This shift creates a foundation where your family is not only living together, but growing in an environment that supports their well-being at every level. And as this understanding becomes clearer, it leads to a powerful question. If your home can be spiritually shaped, then who is guiding and protecting that space? This is where a figure of silent strength becomes essential. A guardian chosen by God, whose presence represents protection, responsibility, and unwavering faith. Saint Joseph. Saint Joseph. The silent guardian chosen by God. There is a kind of strength that does not need to be loud to be powerful. A presence that does not demand attention, yet carries immense responsibility. This is the strength revealed in Saint Joseph. He was not chosen by accident. He was entrusted. In the Holy Bible, within the Gospel of Matthew and the Gospel of Luke, Saint Joseph is presented as the man chosen to guard what was most sacred. He was given the responsibility to protect Mary and Jesus, not through dominance or control, but through obedience, discernment, and unwavering faith. This reveals something essential about true protection. It is not always visible, it is not always recognized, but it is always active. Saint Joseph's life was marked by decisions made in silence. He listened, he discerned, and he acted with precision when it mattered most. When danger approached, he did not hesitate. When direction was given, he followed without resistance. This is the model of a protector guided by God. He did not rely on his own understanding alone. He responded to divine instruction. This allowed him to protect in ways that went beyond human awareness. He was present when needed, and guided when action was required. This kind of protection carries a different weight. It is not based on constant control. It is based on alignment with God's will. When you begin to understand Saint Joseph's role, you start to see protection differently. It is not about trying to manage every possible outcome. It is about being connected to a source that sees beyond what you can see. Saint Joseph represents that connection. His authority does not come from position or recognition. It comes from trust. He trusted God completely, even when the path was uncertain. This trust allowed him to act with confidence, even in situations that required immediate response. This is why his presence is still invoked today. Not as a distant figure, but as a spiritual guardian who understands responsibility, who understands protection, and who carries a legacy of faith that continues to inspire and guide. When you invite Saint Joseph into your life, you are not replacing your role as protector. You are strengthening it. You are aligning your care for your family with a higher level of guidance. This creates a different kind of security. One that is not dependent only on your ability, but supported by a spiritual authority that has already proven its strength. Saint Joseph's protection was not limited to physical safety. It included discernment, direction, and presence. He knew when to move, when to stay, and how to respond under pressure. This is what makes his example so powerful. He represents a protection that is both calm and decisive, a protection that does not react with fear, but responds with clarity. And when this kind of protection is invited into your home, something begins to change. The atmosphere shifts. There is a sense of order, of calm, of stability that begins to take form. Not because everything becomes perfect, but because there is a presence guiding what happens within that space. This leads to a deeper realization. Protection is not always something you can see directly, but it can be felt. And when it is present, it creates a sense of peace that goes beyond explanation. This opens the door to understanding a powerful truth. The protection that surrounds your family is not always visible, but it is always active. The power of protection you cannot see, but can feel. There is a kind of protection that does not announce itself. It does not create noise, it does not draw attention, and yet it is constantly at work. You may not see it with your eyes, but you feel it in moments that could have gone wrong but did not. You recognize it in situations that shifted without clear explanation. You sense it in the quiet assurance that somehow things are being held together. This is invisible protection. Most people are trained to trust only what they can see. If there is no visible sign, they assume there is no action. But the Holy Bible reveals a different reality. Protection is not limited to the physical realm. It extends into what cannot be immediately perceived. This means that even when everything appears ordinary, there may be forces at work preserving, redirecting, and sustaining your life and your family. This changes how you interpret what happens around you. Instead of focusing only on visible outcomes, you begin to consider what may have been prevented, what did not happen, what was avoided, what was quietly redirected. These are often the clearest signs of protection, even though they pass without recognition. This kind of awareness creates a deeper sense of trust. You begin to understand that protection is not something that activates only in moments of crisis. It is continuous. It operates in the background of your life, covering areas you are not even aware of. Saint Joseph's role reflects this reality in a powerful way. He protected without seeking recognition. He acted when necessary. But much of his protection existed in his constant presence, in his attentiveness, in his readiness to respond. His strength was not always visible, but it was always active. This is the nature of true protection. It does not need to be seen to be real. When you begin to accept this, something shifts inside you. The need to constantly verify, to constantly see proof, begins to decrease. You become more receptive to the idea that you are being guarded even when you do not perceive it directly. This reduces a specific kind of tension. The tension that comes from believing that if you do not see protection, it is not there. Instead, you begin to live with a quiet confidence, not based on visible evidence, but on spiritual understanding. This confidence allows your mind to rest more easily. It allows your heart to release some of the pressure it has been carrying. But there is something important to understand. Invisible protection does not replace your actions, it supports them. You still care, you still act, you still remain attentive, but you are no longer doing it alone. There is a covering that extends beyond your effort. And when this becomes real to you, it leads to a natural next step. If protection is always available, then it can be invited intentionally. It can be established over your home, over your family, over every space that matters to you. This is where everything begins to take a more defined form, not just understanding protection, but activating it through a conscious act of faith, through consecration, consecrating your home to God with intention and faith. There is a difference between hoping your home is protected and intentionally placing it under protection. Hope creates expectation, but consecration establishes direction. It is a deliberate act, a decision that defines what has authority over your home and your family. Many people desire peace inside their home, but they never take the step of defining what governs that space. Without direction, the environment becomes influenced by everything that enters it. Words, emotions, external pressures, and even unseen tensions begin to shape the atmosphere. Consecration changes that completely. When you consecrate your home to God, you are not performing a symbolic act. You are establishing spiritual alignment. You are declaring that your home is not an unprotected space. It is a place under divine authority. The Holy Bible reveals that when something is dedicated to God, it is set apart. It is no longer common. It carries a different presence. This means your home is no longer just a place where life happens. It becomes a place where God is invited to remain. This shift affects everything. The way you think inside your home begins to change. The way you speak begins to change. The way conflicts are handled begins to change. You become more aware of what enters that environment because you understand that your home now carries a defined spiritual direction. Consecration begins with intention. It starts with a decision that is clear and direct. You choose to place your home under God's care. You acknowledge that your protection alone is not enough, and you invite a higher protection to take its place over everything within your space. But intention alone is not enough. Faith must follow. Faith is what sustains consecration over time. It is what keeps the atmosphere aligned even when situations try to disrupt it. It is what allows you to remain steady when challenges arise within your home. Saint Joseph lived in this reality. The home he protected was not defined only by its physical structure. It was defined by its spiritual purpose. His role was not only to provide safety, but to maintain an environment where God's presence could remain. This is what makes consecration powerful. It is not a one-time act. It is a continuous awareness. A way of living where your home remains aligned with what you have declared over it. As you begin to consecrate your home, you will notice something. The atmosphere begins to shift. Small changes start to appear. Conversations become calmer. Reactions become more controlled. There is a sense of order that begins to replace tension. This does not mean there will be no challenges, but it means those challenges will not dominate the environment. There is a covering in place, and this covering extends beyond the walls. It reaches every person within your home. Because once the environment is aligned, the next step becomes clear. Protection is not only for the space, it is for each individual within it. Each person carries their own needs, their own vulnerabilities, their own path, and this leads to a deeper and more personal step. Protecting each member of your family individually through prayer. There is something important to understand about protection. It is not only collective, it is also personal. While your home can be covered as a whole, each person within it carries their own journey, their own thoughts, their own struggles, and their own unseen battles. This means that true protection goes deeper than the environment. It reaches the individual. Many people pray for their family in a general way. They ask for protection over everyone, and that is powerful. But there is another level that brings even greater strength. When you begin to pray for each person individually, when you take a moment to think about each member of your family, something changes in your awareness. You begin to see beyond the surface. You recognize their specific needs, their vulnerabilities, their challenges, even the things they may never express out loud. This kind of prayer is intentional. It is focused. It is personal. It creates a direct connection between your faith and the life of each person you love. The Holy Bible reveals that God knows each person individually, not as part of a group, but as a unique life with a unique path. This means that protection can also be specific. It can reach areas that are personal and precise. When you pray for each member of your family, you are aligning with this truth. You are not only asking for general safety, you are asking for guidance, protection, clarity, and peace in the exact areas where each person needs it most. This transforms the way you pray. Instead of repeating the same words, you begin to speak with awareness. You begin to bring real situations, real concerns, real intentions into your prayer. This creates a stronger connection and a deeper sense of purpose. Saint Joseph lived with this level of responsibility. He did not protect a concept of family. He protected real individuals. Mary, with her unique role and challenges, Jesus with a mission that required constant care and discernment. His protection was not generic, it was attentive. This is the model. To care in a way that sees each person clearly. When you begin to pray in this way, something powerful starts to happen within you. Your concern becomes structured. Instead of carrying a general anxiety about your family, you begin to place specific areas into God's hands. This reduces the emotional weight, because you are no longer holding everything internally. You are releasing it intentionally. This also strengthens your connection with your family. Even without speaking, you begin to feel more aligned with them. Your awareness increases. Your patience grows. Your responses become more thoughtful. Protection is no longer just something you hope for. It becomes something you actively participate in. And as this practice continues, another realization begins to emerge. Protection is not only about asking for what is good, it is also about identifying and removing what should not remain. Because sometimes what disturbs the peace of a home is not what is missing. It is what has been allowed to stay. This leads to a necessary and often overlooked step: closing spiritual doors that may be allowing disturbance into your home. Closing spiritual doors that may allow disturbance into your home. There are moments when everything seems normal on the surface, yet something feels off within the home. Conversations become tense without a clear reason. Small disagreements grow faster than they should. The atmosphere feels heavier, even when nothing obvious has changed. These are signs that something deeper may be influencing the environment. Not everything that affects your home is visible. The Holy Bible reveals that spiritual influence is real. It operates quietly, often unnoticed, but it can shape emotions, thoughts, and behaviors if it is allowed to remain. This is why protection is not only about inviting what is good, but also about closing the doors to what should not have access. A spiritual door is not a physical object. It is an opening created through patterns, attitudes, words, and choices that allow negative influence to enter and remain. Unresolved conflicts can become a door. Repeated negative words can become a door. Constant exposure to environments or content that bring fear, anger, or instability can become a door. Even silence in situations that require correction can create space for disturbance to grow. When these doors remain open, the atmosphere of the home begins to change slowly. Not all at once, but gradually. Peace becomes less consistent. Patience becomes shorter. Reactions become stronger. This is not random. It is the result of what has been allowed to remain without being addressed. Closing these doors requires awareness first. You begin by recognizing what may be affecting your home, not with fear but with clarity. You observe patterns. You pay attention to repeated tensions. You identify what does not align with the peace you desire. Once there is awareness, action must follow. Closing a spiritual door means removing its source. If it is conflict, it requires resolution. If it is negative communication, it requires change in how words are used. If it is influence from outside sources, it requires boundaries. This is not about control. It is about alignment. You are choosing what has access to your environment. Saint Joseph lived with this level of awareness. He protected not only by responding to external threats, but by maintaining an environment that supported the presence of God. His decisions were intentional. His actions were guided. He did not allow what could bring harm to remain unaddressed. This is what strengthens a home. Not the absence of challenges, but the ability to respond correctly to what enters that space. As you begin to close these doors, something begins to change. The atmosphere starts to clear. Tension begins to reduce. Communication becomes more balanced. The sense of heaviness begins to lift. This does not happen instantly, but it happens consistently when the right actions are taken. You begin to feel that your home is becoming lighter, more stable, more aligned. But closing doors is only part of the process. Once disturbance is removed, something else must take its place, because an empty space will always be filled by something. This leads to the next step: intentionally inviting peace into every area where tension once existed. Asking for peace in the places where tension once lived. Every home carries moments that leave marks. Words spoken during frustration, silence that lasted longer than it should, misunderstandings that were never fully resolved. Even when time passes, these moments can remain present in subtle ways, shaping how people feel, how they respond, and how they relate to one another. Tension does not always disappear on its own. It often settles quietly into the atmosphere, influencing interactions without being clearly noticed. This is why many families feel something is not right, even when nothing is openly wrong. Peace must be invited intentionally. The Holy Bible shows that peace is not simply the absence of conflict, it is the presence of something greater. It is a condition that transforms how people think, speak, and respond. It creates space for understanding, for patience, for restoration. When you begin to ask God for peace in specific areas of your home, you are not ignoring what happened. You are addressing it at a deeper level. You are bringing light into places that were left in shadow. This requires honesty. You must be willing to recognize where tension exists, not to assign blame, but to create awareness. It may be in certain conversations that always lead to disagreement. It may be in relationships that feel distant. It may be in patterns that repeat without resolution. Once you recognize these areas, your prayer becomes more precise. You begin to ask for peace not in a general way, but in specific moments, specific relationships, specific spaces within your home. This creates a direct impact. It brings clarity where confusion once remained. Saint Joseph lived in an environment where peace had to be protected constantly. The responsibility he carried required emotional stability, spiritual clarity, and the ability to maintain harmony even under pressure. His strength was not only in action, but in preserving the peace that allowed the Holy Family to remain aligned. This shows that peace is not passive. It is maintained with intention. When you ask for peace, you are also preparing yourself to act in alignment with it. Your words begin to change. Your tone becomes more controlled. Your responses become more measured. You begin to contribute to the peace you are asking for. This is where transformation begins, not only in the environment, but within each person. As peace starts to take root, communication becomes clearer. Reactions become less intense. There is more space between what is felt and how it is expressed. This space allows for better decisions, better understanding, and stronger relationships. The home begins to feel different, not because everything is perfect, but because there is a new foundation in place, a foundation built on peace. And once peace begins to settle into the environment, another powerful step becomes possible. You begin to realize that your words carry authority, that what you declare over your home has the power to shape its atmosphere. This leads to a deeper understanding. The authority of declaring protection over your home and your family. The spiritual authority of declaring protection over your home. There is a moment when prayer moves beyond request and becomes declaration. This is where many people hesitate, not because they lack faith, but because they have not fully understood the authority that has been given to them. You are not only called to ask for protection, you are also called to declare it. The Holy Bible reveals that words carry weight. They are not empty. They establish direction, they shape environments, and they influence what is allowed to remain. When spoken with faith and alignment, words become an extension of spiritual authority. This changes how you approach protection. Instead of speaking from fear, you begin to speak from position. Not a position of control, but a position of trust in God's power. You are not creating protection on your own. You are affirming what God has already made available. This is what gives declaration its strength. When you declare protection over your home, you are not hoping something might happen. You are affirming that your home is under God's covering. You are establishing with clarity what has authority in that space. This creates alignment. Your thoughts, your words, and your faith begin to move in the same direction. There is no contradiction between what you believe and what you say. This consistency strengthens the atmosphere of your home. Saint Joseph's life reflects quiet authority. He did not speak excessively, but when he acted, his actions were aligned with divine instruction. His authority came from obedience, from clarity, from knowing what needed to be done and doing it without hesitation. This is the same principle applied in declaration. You do not need many words. You need clarity and alignment. When you declare protection, you are setting boundaries. You are defining what is allowed and what is not. You're establishing that your home is not open to disturbance, not open to fear, not open to confusion. It is a place where God's presence has authority. This kind of declaration changes how you perceive your environment. You no longer feel like your home is exposed. You begin to see it as covered, defined, guarded. This perception influences your behavior, your reactions, and your sense of security. There is also a practical impact. Your communication becomes more intentional. You avoid words that bring negativity into the environment. You become more aware of how your speech contributes to the atmosphere you are creating. This reinforces the protection you are declaring. Over time, this practice creates a stable environment. Not because challenges disappear, but because they no longer define the space. There is a structure in place, a spiritual structure that supports peace, clarity, and protection. And as this structure becomes stronger, something begins to take shape within your home. A consistent presence, not something temporary, not something occasional, but something that remains. This leads to the next step. Creating an environment where God's presence is not only invited but established. Creating an environment where God's presence dwells. There is a difference between inviting God's presence and creating an environment where His presence remains. Many people experience moments of peace, moments of clarity, moments where everything feels aligned. But those moments often pass, and the atmosphere returns to what it was before. This happens because presence was welcomed, but not sustained. To create an environment where God's presence dwells, something deeper is required. It is not a single action. It is a way of living within your home. It is a continuous alignment between what you believe, what you say, and how you act. The Holy Bible reveals that God's presence is not distant. It responds to alignment. Where there is openness, where there is reverence, where there is consistency, His presence remains active. This means your home can become a place where peace is not occasional but constant. But this does not happen automatically. It is shaped through daily choices. The way you speak inside your home matters. Words create atmosphere. Words can either build or weaken what you are trying to establish. When communication becomes intentional, the environment begins to reflect that intention. The way you respond to challenges also matters. Every home faces tension, misunderstanding, and pressure. But how these moments are handled determines whether the atmosphere remains stable or becomes disrupted. When reactions are guided by awareness, the environment stays aligned. Saint Joseph lived in a home where God's presence was central, not because of constant visible signs, but because of consistent alignment. His actions, his decisions, and his attitude created a space where peace could remain. He did not rely on moments. He maintained a condition. This is what transforms a home. Consistency. When you begin to live with this awareness, small changes start to accumulate. You become more attentive to what you allow into your environment. You begin to recognize what strengthens peace and what weakens it. You adjust accordingly. This is not about perfection. It is about direction. A home where God's presence dwells is not a place without challenges. It is a place where challenges are handled differently. There is more patience, more clarity, more control over reactions. Over time, this creates stability. A stability that can be felt by everyone who enters that space. There is a sense of calm that does not depend on external conditions. It is rooted in what has been established within. And as this environment becomes stronger, something begins to change within you as well. The need to control everything starts to decrease, because you begin to understand that your home is not sustained only by your effort. There is a presence actively maintaining what you have aligned. This realization leads to a deeper level of trust, a trust that allows you to release the pressure of trying to manage every outcome, a trust that allows you to place your family's safety into God's hands with greater confidence. This leads to the next step, letting go of the need to carry everything alone and fully trusting God with the protection of your family. trusting the safety of your family into God's hands. There comes a moment when effort reaches its limit, not because you stop caring, but because you realize that no amount of attention, planning, or vigilance can guarantee complete protection. This realization can either create more anxiety or open the door to a deeper kind of trust. Most people live trying to manage everything. They think ahead, anticipate problems, prepare for possibilities, and carry a constant sense of responsibility for what might happen. This creates a silent pressure that rarely leaves. You begin to feel like everything depends on you. But this is not the position you were meant to carry alone. The Holy Bible reveals a truth that challenges this way of thinking. Protection is not sustained only by human effort. It is sustained by God's presence, by His awareness, by His constant attention to every detail of life. This does not remove your role. It redefines it. You are called to care, to act, to be present. But you are not called to control everything. You are not called to carry the weight of outcomes that are beyond your reach. Trust begins where control ends. This is where many struggle. Letting go of control feels like vulnerability. It feels like stepping into uncertainty. But in reality, it is stepping into alignment with something greater. When you trust God with the safety of your family, you are not becoming passive. You are becoming aligned with a protection that does not depend on your limitations. Saint Joseph lived this reality. There were moments when he had to act quickly, when he had to make decisions that would protect the Holy Family. But there were also moments when he had no clear path, no immediate solution, no visible answer. In those moments, his strength was trust. He followed divine direction, even when it required movement into the unknown. He did not wait for complete clarity. He responded with faith, knowing that protection was not coming only from his actions, but from God's guidance. This is what trust looks like in practice. It is not the absence of action. It is action without anxiety. When you begin to trust in this way, something shifts internally. The constant tension starts to decrease. The need to anticipate every possible outcome begins to soften. Your mind becomes less occupied with what could go wrong and more grounded in what is already being sustained. This creates space. Space for peace, space for clarity, space for better decisions. You begin to move differently, not driven by fear, but guided by confidence, not trying to control every detail, but aware that your family is under a protection that continues even when you are not actively thinking about it. This trust also changes how you rest. You are able to disconnect without guilt. You are able to pause without feeling that something will fall apart in your absence. You begin to understand that protection does not stop when your attention shifts. It continues. And as this trust deepens, something powerful becomes clear. You are not the only one watching over your family. There is a presence that sees beyond what you see, that anticipates beyond what you can anticipate, that protects in ways you cannot measure. This realization leads to a deeper connection with a figure who embodies this kind of faithful protection. A protector who acted with trust, who responded with obedience, and whose intercession continues to carry strength. This leads to the next step, understanding the power of Saint Joseph's intercession in the life of your family. The power of Saint Joseph's intercession in family life. There is a level of protection that goes beyond your direct actions and even beyond your personal prayers. It is the strength of intercession, the reality that someone who has already walked in obedience, responsibility, and faith can stand with you spiritually and support what you are asking from God. This is where Saint Joseph's role becomes deeply powerful. He is not only an example from the past, he is a present intercessor, a guardian whose life was defined by protecting a family entrusted directly by God. This was not a symbolic responsibility. It was real, demanding, and constant, and he fulfilled it with precision. The Holy Bible, through the Gospel of Matthew and the Gospel of Luke, shows that Saint Joseph responded immediately when guidance was given. When there was danger, he moved. When there was uncertainty, he trusted. When there was responsibility, he accepted it fully. This is what gives weight to his intercession. He understands what it means to carry the responsibility of a family. He understands the pressure, the decisions, the silent concerns that come with protecting those you love. His life was shaped by these realities. This creates a powerful connection. When you ask for his intercession, you are not speaking to someone distant from your experience. You are connecting with someone who has lived the exact role of protector, provider, and guardian under God's direction. This makes your prayer more grounded. You are not asking alone. You are aligning your request with a life that has already demonstrated faith under pressure. This strengthens your confidence, because you are no longer relying only on your own understanding. Intercession adds support. It reinforces what you are asking. It brings another layer of alignment between your intention and God's will. It is not about replacing your relationship with God. It is about strengthening it through a connection with someone who has already walked that path with faithfulness. Saint Joseph's intercession carries a specific kind of strength. It is calm, steady, and precise. It does not create confusion. It brings clarity. It does not amplify fear. It reinforces trust. His presence reflects order, responsibility, and protection that is guided, not reactive. This begins to influence your home. As you invite his intercession, you may begin to notice subtle changes. A stronger sense of responsibility within the family. More clarity in decisions. A quieter confidence in how challenges are handled. This is not coincidence. It is alignment. Your home begins to reflect the same principles that defined his life. Protection becomes more structured. Decisions become more intentional. The atmosphere becomes more stable. And as this stability grows, something else begins to happen within you. The emotional weight you have been carrying starts to lift, because you realize that protection is not resting only on your shoulders. It is supported by a spiritual presence that understands your responsibility and stands with you in it. This leads to a moment of relief, a moment where you can begin to feel something that may have been missing for a long time. Peace. Not the kind of peace that depends on everything being perfect, but the kind of peace that comes from knowing your home is covered, guided, and protected. This leads to the next step, receiving that peace fully, allowing it to settle within you, and recognizing that your home is no longer exposed, but guarded. Receiving the peace that comes from knowing your home is guarded. There is a moment when everything you have been carrying begins to loosen its grip, not because every problem has disappeared, not because every uncertainty has been resolved, but because something inside you has changed. You begin to realize that your home is not unprotected. Up to this point, your thoughts may have been driven by vigilance, always observing, always anticipating, always trying to stay one step ahead of what could go wrong. This constant state of alert creates a tension that slowly drains your energy. Even in quiet moments, the mind continues working. But now, something shifts. You start to understand that protection is already in place, that your home is not exposed, that there is a covering over your family that does not depend on your constant awareness. This realization opens the door to peace, not a temporary relief, but a deeper state where your mind begins to settle, where your thoughts no longer race through possibilities, where your emotions are no longer reacting to imagined scenarios. Peace begins to take space where tension once existed. The Holy Bible reveals that peace is not something you force. It is something you receive. It comes when the heart aligns with truth, when you accept that God is present, active, and attentive, even when you are not thinking about it. This acceptance changes how you feel. You begin to breathe differently. Your body relaxes. Your thoughts become more organized. There is less urgency, less pressure, less internal noise. This is not passivity. This is confidence. Confidence that your home is under protection. Confidence that your family is not navigating life alone. Confidence that what you cannot see is still being handled. Saint Joseph's presence reflects this kind of peace. He did not live in constant anxiety. Even with the responsibility he carried, his strength came from knowing that he was not acting alone, that God's guidance was active in every decision, in every movement, in every moment. This awareness allowed him to remain steady, and this same steadiness can begin to take form within you. As you receive this peace, something important begins to happen. You stop trying to force outcomes. You stop carrying what does not belong to you. You stop allowing fear to define your internal state. Instead, you begin to live from a place of assurance. Your home feels different. There is a calm that remains even when challenges arise. There is a stability that is not easily shaken. There is a sense that everything is being sustained, even when you are not actively thinking about it. This is what it means to receive peace, not as an idea, but as a condition that becomes part of how you live. And as this peace becomes established, one final transformation begins to take place. Fear begins to lose its position. Because where there is true protection and where peace has taken root, fear no longer has space to remain in control. This leads to the final understanding. What happens when God guards your home completely? When God guards your home, fear has no place to remain. There is a point where everything becomes clear. Not in theory, not in words, but in the way you begin to experience your life and your home. What once felt uncertain now carries direction. What once felt heavy now carries stability. When God truly guards your home, fear loses its position. Fear may still try to appear. It may still attempt to bring thoughts, questions, and possibilities into your mind. But it no longer takes control. It no longer defines your reactions. It no longer determines how you move forward. This is the transformation. Before, fear could influence your decisions. It could shape your expectations. It could create tension even in moments where nothing was happening. But now something has changed at the foundation. Your home is no longer a place of exposure. It is a place of covering. The Holy Bible reveals that when God is present, there is order. There is protection that does not depend on circumstances. There is a stability that remains even when situations around you are not fully clear. This is what begins to define your home, not the absence of challenges, but the presence of protection. You begin to see your environment differently, not as something fragile, but as something sustained, not as something vulnerable, but as something guarded. This perception changes everything. Your thoughts become more stable. Your emotions become more controlled. Your responses become more intentional. You are no longer reacting from fear, but responding from confidence. Saint Joseph's example becomes fully realized at this point. His life was not free from difficulty, but it was anchored in protection that came from God. His role was to act, to respond, to remain attentive, but never to carry the burden alone. This is the same position you now begin to occupy. You still care. You still protect. You still remain present. But you do so with the awareness that your home is not dependent only on your effort. It is sustained by a higher authority. This creates freedom. You are no longer living in constant anticipation of what could go wrong. You are no longer trying to control every outcome. You are no longer carrying a weight that was never meant to be yours alone. Instead, you move with clarity. You live with peace. You act with confidence. Your home becomes a place where stability is felt, where peace is consistent, where protection is understood not as something uncertain, but as something established. And this is what changes everything. When God guards your home, fear does not disappear completely, but it loses its ability to remain. It cannot stay where trust has taken root. It cannot dominate where peace has been established. It cannot control where protection is understood. Your home becomes more than a place. It becomes a space where faith is lived, where peace is sustained, and where every person within it is covered by a protection that does not fail. This is not temporary. This is a new foundation, and from this foundation, your life and your family begin to move forward with a sense of security that does not depend on what happens outside, but on what has been established within.